Welcome back to the Adam Schefter podcast. We are coming off Thanksgiving, another head coach firing, and heading straight into week 14. And joining us today will be a member of the gloried 1985 Chicago Bears team, a man who played guard there after going to high school at Joliet Catholic in Chicago, going to college in Notre Dame, being around the Chicago Bears his entire life practically, and now being a radio analyst for the team. Tom Thayer will join us to break down the firing of Matt Eberflus and the future of the Chicago Bears. But before we get to Tom Thayer, of course, we are joined today from the Pat McAfee Show by Ty Schmit for this week's weekly six-pack.
Great to be back, Schefty. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and hope all the listeners had a wonderful Thanksgiving as well. But I mean, we're in it now. Like the great game has finally started. This is the stretch run. Again, we say this every week. It's impossible to imagine that we're in week 14 already. There's snow on the ground here, so I can't wait for these last several weeks of the season. Looks like it's really shaping up. I mean, the playoff picture in both conferences is absolutely fantastic right now. We got a lot to get to, but let's start with topic number one. And Monday night, what do you make of the whole Jameis Winston experience, Shefty? We kind of talked about this a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago. It's just, I mean, that is a perfect way to describe it. It's an experience. And then on top of that, how do you put into perspective where the Broncos are at today?
Well, let's take them both together here for the topic number one. Basically, the Jameis Winston experience is unlike any other. Think about this. There's never been a Browns quarterback in franchise history, not Otto Graham, not Lou Groza, not Bernie Kosar, not Brian Sipe, not anybody we could ever think of who's played quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, who threw for more yards in a single game than Jameis Winston threw for Monday night against the Denver Broncos. 497. There's also never been a quarterback in NFL history who's thrown for over 450 yards and also threw 2 pick sixes in the same game and nearly a third pick six at the end of the game, which would have been unbelievable and a fitting way to cap the night. And here's the deal. You can say whatever you want. Like, I watch the Browns now. Their offense, their team has so much more energy than it did in the beginning of the year, so much more life. And I know Jameis is going to make some plays there. And I always think of what one coach told me about Jameis Winston. There's a high degree of variance when it comes to Jameis Winston. But the fact of the matter is, the guy is compelling to watch. He makes it fun. He is a good quarterback, and they're in the games. What else can you ask? And by the way, when you're going into next year and Deshaun Watson has a salary cap number of $73 million and you still owe him $92 million in guaranteed money and you need a quarterback, like, wouldn't it make sense if you could get Jameis back on a team-friendly type of deal? I don't know. What is that? 2 years, $20 million. I'm making this up with incentives. Now, he may want a lot more, and there may be another team out there that's willing to pay him more. And if there is, good for him. But if I were Cleveland, I would want Jameis Winston back in my quarterback room next year. I would want him as part of the organization. The only thing that could change that would be if they follow the Denver Broncos formula and go and draft a quarterback up high and put him on that rookie contract, which is what Denver did with Bo Nix, which allowed the Broncos to escape salary cap purgatory, which him on the rookie contract. They have right now, the Denver Broncos, $80.1 million in dead cap money this year, the highest figure in the National Football League. And while they're dealing with that 50 plus million, of which is due to Russell Wilson and his departure, they got Bo Nix on the rookie contract. They're winning games. They're 2 games up in the playoff positioning. They're the current number 7 seed as they go into their bye week before a big game against your Indianapolis Colts for a wild card spot. So the Broncos are in a great spot because they found a rookie quarterback on that rookie contract. The Browns may have to do the same, but I don't know that they should be willing to let go of Jameis. The guy is incredible to watch. He's great theater. He's great entertainment. And I don't care that there's a high degree of variance. To me, Jameis should be playing quarterback somewhere.
I agree. I mean, you look at that Browns team before he was playing, and you mentioned it. They were lifeless, just dead. I mean, kind of just rolling the ball out there, and it showed. I mean, they were not, the games were not competitive at all. And good, bad,
They
or
were boring. They
yeah,
were boring.
so boring. Good, bad, or indifferent for how Jameis plays. His teammates love him. I mean, look, they trade for Jerry Jeudy. He's a first-round pick. Look at his splits when he was with Deshaun Watson. Look at him last night. I mean, he has a career night, plays unbelievable. Like, there's a lot to be said about that. And granted, they're not winning, but I agree. If you can get Jameis back on a 2-year, $20 million deal, that seems like a no-brainer. And then the Broncos, I mean, you mentioned it on Pat's show yesterday. Obviously, everything that Sean Payton has done with Bo Nix has been remarkable, and kind of seeing his maturation throughout the season has been awesome. But how about Vance Joseph? I mean, you said it yesterday. This is the same team that gave up 73 points to the Dolphins last year, and we're thinking, what the hell's going on here? This is, and then all of a sudden now it's, if you're a team in the AFC and that the Broncos are in that 7th playoff spot, kind of like the Chargers, like that's another team you do not want to see in the playoffs, I don't think.
They're a tough, feisty team. They're better than people thought. They've overcome a lot. Sean Payton deserves a lot of the credit for that. Bo Nix deserves a lot of credit for that. Bo Nix, right now, I mean, I know Offensive Rookie of the Year is going to be Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix, and we'll see how the season finishes out. Those two guys will decide it, right?
Yeah. After Jaden's game against the Titans, too, I think, there was kind of like a even playing field. Then he has 4 touchdowns and lights up the scoreboard. So I think the odds say he has a slight advantage now.
Both teams have a bye. Let's see what happens with both quarterbacks after the bye.
Absolutely. Speaking of the bye, Shefty, let's move to topic number 2. Some teams are, this is the last bye week of the season. So what stands out there? You just mentioned 2 teams in playoff position who are on a bye this week.
We talked about Washington. Remember they traded before the deadline for Marshawn Lattimore? Mm-hmm. All this momentum, they're winning games. They were in first place at the time. And since then, they've hit a bit of a rough patch, though. The Commanders were able to come through with a big win this past week against the Titans, which is exactly the way you want to head into the bye. But here's a little headline. When they get back from their bye after this week, it sounds like Marshawn Lattimore is going to make his Commanders debut in the first game back for Washington. You saw that they released Emmanuel Forbes, their first-round draft pick, former first-round draft pick who was claimed on waivers by the Los Angeles Rams. And I think part of the reason they released him is they knew that they had Lattimore coming back after the bye. And it looks like he is tracking to play his first game for the Commanders, which will be, 6 weeks after the trade deadline or 5 weeks after the trade deadline? We've been waiting for Marshawn Lattimore to make his debut, and this will be a little jolt in the arm for Washington, coming off its bye, getting its Pro Bowl cornerback back. And by the way, when they do bring back Lattimore for his first game as a Commander next week, guess where that game will be?
Where's that?
In New Orleans against his former team. What better way than to bring back Marshawn Lattimore for his first game as a Commander in New Orleans against the Saints, the team that traded him away?
Talk about the NFL scriptwriters just, hitting the nail on the head once again. That's incredible. Can't wait to see him actually take the field. It's been, you almost forget that they traded for him. So very excited for that. Let's move to topic number 3 in this week's 6-pack. We just talked about a lot of teams, on the last bye of the season. Never mind a bye. The 49ers, they just need a break. We talked about this again, yesterday on Pat's show, just injuries mounting up. And for a team that had so much promise, just talk about a disaster season. Is there anyone who's had it worse than they have?
No, it almost feels like, again, I may have mentioned this before, like it's one of those damn Yankee deals where they made a deal with the devil. Hey, give us a couple of cracks at the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And in 2024, you can have all the players you want due to injury. And so this year, they've lost so many players. We knew Christian McCaffrey was going to miss multiple games and probably the season with that PCL injury to his knee. But then Kyle Shanahan on Monday comes out and says, Christian McCaffrey's backup, Jordan Mason, who was so good early in the year, is now basically done for 4 games with a high ankle sprain. He goes on injured reserve in 4 games right now. You can do the math. You're not going to be back and play again this season. So there's no McCaffrey. There's no Jordan Mason. Let's keep him on. They already lost Elijah Mitchell earlier in the season. It's a 3rd running back. So they are down right now to their 4th string running back for the rest of the season. Think about that. And it's a rookie, and they like this rookie a lot. And I think he's going to be really good. But They're decimated at running back. They've already lost Javon Hargrave at defensive tackle. They've had Brock Purdy miss time. They've had George Kittle miss time. They've had any number of players miss time. And not only that, but how about all the tragedies that they've gone through as an organization? Aside from the injury, the mental toll that this has taken on everybody. Travarius Ward lost his daughter. Trent Williams' wife, Sandra, announced on Monday that the couple had a son, Trenton Jr., who was stillborn on November 24th. You could imagine the emotions that he's been dealing with, that Charvarius Ward has been dealing with, that their dearest friends and teammates have been dealing with. So there's been a physical pain, a toll, a mental toll. And it just is one of those years where nothing is going right. They're not going to win the division. They're not going to make the playoffs. The team that everybody thought they were, they're not this year. And it's just one of those things where it goes to show you that when you have a window and you have an opportunity to go win a Super Bowl and you don't get it done, that stays with you for a very long time.
Not to mention Ricky Pearsall getting shot and, luckily not dying from that. But, a guy who had so much promise on top of Ayuk getting hurt, then it's like, hey, we're expecting Ricky Pearsall to kind of fill in, and he misses all that time. It's just been a nightmare. It really has. And I think people over-exaggerate about windows closing and all that kind of stuff, but the bill's going to come due on Brock Purdy, too. How much different does this team look next year, Shefty?
Well, they're going to have to make changes because you can't pay Brock Purdy, let's call it $55 million a year, and not feel it elsewhere. They had a window with Brock Purdy on his rookie contract. The amazing thing is, right, they give up all those draft picks for Trey Lance and set the organization back, but then Brock Purdy bails them out and comes through as Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in his draft, and becomes a star standout quarterback, and they're able to play with him on the rookie contract again. And now the bill's going to come due on Brock Purdy, and now that's going to be a setback for other people. And it's just one of those things. That's how football works these days. If a quarterback is good, he's going to get paid, and Brock Purdy's going to get paid, and that's going to cost them other players. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, it is what it is. That's life in the NFL, especially when you find a gem late like that. I don't think he's going to be taking much of a hometown discount when he's been making what he's been making these last several years. Let's move on to topic number 4 of the six-pack, Shefty, and the team that kind of delivered the death blow to the 49ers on Sunday night. How about the Buffalo Bills and what they're doing? I think you look at their roster going into this season, and everyone was kind of ho-hum about them. Hey, they're not going to look the same, but Josh Allen's continued ascension and just kind of all the guys they've needed to step up have stepped up. And it's hard to argue they might be the best team in the AFC.
Well, listen, 5 straight division titles. That's Patriot-like. And so they win a division with 5 games remaining this season. The only other teams to do that since division realignment in 2002 were the 2009 Colts, the 2007 Patriots, and the 2004 Eagles. All of those teams reached but lost in the Super Bowl. So if history is any indication, what the Bills have done this year is they're going to reach the Super Bowl and they're going to lose. Can you imagine for a moment, though, Ty, if we get a Buffalo-Detroit Super Bowl? By the way, Buffalo and Detroit play not this week, but next week, which is going to be a great game. And there's a chance that those two teams could be in the Super Bowl. Would you be surprised if they did? I wouldn't, right? In the NFC, it certainly looks like it's going to be Detroit or Philly. In the AFC, it's fairly wide open. KC, Buffalo, Baltimore, a lot of good teams there. We'll see how that shakes out in the AFC. But Buffalo has been a model of consistency. They're doing it largely because the quarterback is who he is, an MVP candidate. He's been tremendous, Josh Allen has. And the Bills are rolling right now, have put away the division, and they're 1 game behind the Chiefs. 1 game, and they've already beaten the Chiefs. So it's not going to take a lot for the Bills to chase down the Chiefs and be able to host a potential AFC championship game in Buffalo. That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. The snow, We talked a lot about it last year. The way the Bills were constructed, it was almost like they should have been a dome team, because they were just super fast, kind of basketball on grass type deal. But I think they took that to heart. They're physical. They're a physical team. The way their line plays, the way their running backs have performed this year, and the way they played in the snow on Sunday night against the Niners. I mean, they looked right at home. They looked like they were having fun. It really didn't deter them at all. So, I mean, if we get Lions Bills in the Super Bowl, I'm not so sure the world wouldn't implode. Just, crazy to think about. But speaking of the Lions, Shefty, let's move on to topic number 5 in the six pack. Lions have been the best team in the NFL all season long. I really don't think there's a question about it. They out physical everyone. There's that stat about teams who play the Lions the week after. I think they're like 1-12 or 1-13 or whatever the case may be. But now the injuries are really starting to pile up for the Lions. Do you think, is there any way that they can withstand all of these injuries that they've had, particularly on the defense?
I'm going to say this. We were talking about this on the Pat McAfee Show on Monday, and I can't believe how many injuries they have had and how many they're going to have to withstand. And again, there's not a team in the league that's been any more snake bit this year than the 49ers. But look at the Lions right now, right? They've lost Aiden Hutchinson. They've lost Marcus Davenport. They've lost James Houston to waivers. They lost John Kaminsky. They lost Alex Anzalone. They lost Derek Barnes. They lost Malcolm Rodriguez. They lost their special teams ace, Jalen Reeves-Maben. They've lost so many players to where now they're signing Quan Alexander off Denver's practice squad. They're signing Jamal Adams, the former Pro Bowl safety, off the street. They're plugging in guys, and they're not getting a lot of pressure. And so at some point in time, this is going to hurt them. This is going to show up. I think it has begun to hurt them. And again, it might be that they have to win in shootouts in the playoffs. But you can't lose the amount of defensive talent that they have and think it's not going to impact your team in some small way. Look, everybody watches the Lions and is incredibly impressed, and they're so good, and they've been the best team, all-around team in football. But I'm just telling you right now, these injuries are going to be felt. There's no way that they can get through the season and not feel them. And we could start to feel them as early as Thursday night against the Green Bay Packers in what I think will be the game of the week this week. Packers-Lions, Thursday night, great Thursday night matchup on Amazon. And we'll see how this Lions team can withstand the losses of so many good defensive players.
Well, and that's the other piece of this, Chef. I mean, we talk about the Lions being the best team throughout the entire year. They have to keep their foot on the gas. This isn't a situation like the Bills where it's, hey, you got the division wrapped up, you're fine. The Lions really can't afford to lose a game. I mean, they could go from getting home field advantage, surefire number 1 seed to, what if they're in the Packers situation and they end up getting the 6th seed in the playoffs, and then you have to go on the road for everything. So it's real unfortunate, but it does certainly feel like if there's a team that can withstand that this year,
yeah,
it's the Lions.
I agree.
They have that team a destiny feel. So we'll see. Obviously, it's tough for them, but they've continued to win. So, you really can't say much. Let's stick in the NFC North, Shefty, for the 6th and final topic of this week's six pack. What does the future for the Bears look like now that they fired Eberflus? A lot of people saying, hey, this is probably the most important decision that this franchise will ever make.
Yeah, well, you could say that with every coaching hire, but this is the one that's now, so it is important because you got Caleb Williams, and we're going to go into that in a little bit here. But I think when they move forward, Ryan Poles, their general manager, is going to lead the search. Kevin Warren will be a part of it as well. I think there are a few candidates that just jump out and stand out right away, right? Like we have Thomas Brown as the interim head coach right there. Let's see what he can do down the stretch here. Our upcoming guest has some strong feelings and thoughts on Thomas Brown, the promoted offensive coordinator. I think you're going to look at a guy like the Lions coordinators, Ben Johnson on offense, Aaron Glenn on defense. Logical take from within your division. I think Ben Johnson actually might have some interest in listening for this job, whereas at one point in time, I wouldn't have thought that might be the case. Aaron Glenn, to me, is logical in New Orleans, but Chicago should be absolutely calling him. Brian Flores, same division, Vikings defensive coordinator, went to Boston College with Ryan Poles, the Bears GM. Cliff Kingsbury, the Commanders offensive coordinator, Coach Caleb Williams at USC, last year. Obvious, right? There are some obvious names that you look at. It could be any one of them. Now, there are some other great coordinators and coaching candidates, and we can go into all of them as well. But I think there are some logical guys here: Thomas Brown, Brian Flores, Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, Cliff Kingsbury, Mike Vrabel would be very Bears-like. I could totally see that. So it's up to them to figure it out. But this is a team that just has had too much instability. They made the wrong decisions at the wrong times. The last 3 times they've drafted a quarterback in the first round, whether it was Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields or Caleb Williams, they fired the head coach that season after they drafted the quarterback. Let's stop that. Need these guys to be together, need to marry them up, need them to form a lifelong relationship like Sean McDermott has had with Josh Allen in Buffalo, like Andy Reid has had with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, like John Harbaugh has had with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. Need these guys to be together, which is why it's important to get this hire right. But again, when we talk about wild stats, we opened it with Jameis Winston, the most passing yards in Browns franchise history. Well, how about the fact that this is the first time in franchise history that the Bears ever fired a head coach midseason? Over 100 years, they've never done this. Never. So they made history there. We all knew it was coming. It finally happened. And now the Bears are on a course to move forward. And let's see what they can come up with.